Hi, I'm Norm Abram. Welcome to the New Yankee Workshop. Today we're going to build another one of our outdoor projects, a patio trolley. You know, something that you can roll around to deliver the beverages and refreshment to your guests out on the deck or the patio. That's next, right here on the New Yankee Workshop.
The New Yankee Workshop features the craftsmanship of Norm Abram.
Well, doesn't that look refreshing? This is the patio trolley that I wanted you to see, ready to serve lunch, tea, or drinks. It's made out of teak, and the design is pretty clever. There's a X piece right here, half-lapped in the middle, leads down to a spoked wheel. That might be a bit tricky to build, but I think we can come up with something. There's a fixed tray at the bottom, and then it leads up to the handle to move it around. There's also a pull-out tray, which you can access from either side and use as a little cutting board. But here's one of the features that I really like. This tray is removable. So you can load it up in the house, bring the items out here, make your drinks, and then bring them over to the table. There are a lot of good ideas here. Let's see if we can come up with a version of our own. The patio trolley that we looked at was made out of teak. I've decided to build ours out of mahogany. Mahogany is a good outdoor wood. It's very durable. You see it on boats, you see it on decks now, and furniture is often built out of it. It's also readily available. Now, I started by building a prototype of one side of the patio trolley. Sort of an X shape, half-lapped in the middle. We'll put a handle across the top to connect the sides, and then there'll be two trays. One of them will actually have a removable tray that sits in it. I've built a wheel to roll it around. Now, if you'd like to build our patio trolley, a measure drawing is available with a materials list, and you'll hear more about that before the program ends. I want to start with this wheel. I made it a little larger than the one we saw, because the larger the wheel is, the easier it is to roll it around. If I wet it, you can see that there's some joints. There's 4 segments. You have to have those so you can pull the sides away to install these spokes that go into the center hub. We'll start with that. The segments come from stock that's 3.5 inches wide and 1 1/8 thick. I need 4 pieces mitered on each end that are a little bit longer than the finished diameter of the wheel. But before we use any power tools, let's talk about shop safety. Be sure to read, understand, and follow all the safety rules that come with your power tools. Knowing how to use your power tools properly will greatly reduce the risk of personal injury. And remember this, there is no more important safety rule than to wear these safety glasses. Okay, that fits pretty good. Now what I've done is put witness marks at each corner so that I keep these pieces in the same orientation during the process. Now I just want to put 1 screw in each corner. This square block is going to become the hub of the wheel. And what I want to do now is just wedge it between the pieces that I've just screwed together. It doesn't have to be perfectly centered. Okay, with that wedged in place, I'm now going to take this straight edge and run it right across the miter joints and put a center mark in the hub. Okay, now what I want to do is put a mark for the outside diameter of the wheel, which is going to be 11 inches, 5.5 from the center, and then come back 1 7/8 inches, which is the inside diameter. Set my compass on those points and lay it out. Okay, that's the outer diameter. Okay, that's right on my mark, so that's the inner diameter. Okay, now that takes care of the diameter for the hub. Okay, now these marks will locate the holes for the spokes. Here I'm using a 5/8 inch Forstner bit to drill a hole that goes 3/4 of an inch into what will become the wheel. Here I've adjusted the depth of the cut, and I'm making the corresponding holes in the hub for the spokes. To join the segments together, I'm using these tiny FF size biscuits. Now I'll cut the inside diameter, leaving the line so I can sand it smooth. And there's the hub. Okay, now with it screwed back together, I can sand the inside. Here I've installed a chamfering bit, and I'm just going to knock the edge off that inside corner, and I'll also take care of the hub while I'm at it. I've cut some pieces of 5/8 inch diameter dowel stock, exactly the right length, and I want to dry fit all the pieces together to make sure everything lines up properly, and that seems to be pretty good. So now I can apply some glue and biscuits and clamp it up. All right, that looks pretty good. Everything's aligned. We'll set it aside to dry and start working on the frame. Let's look again at this prototype frame. Now these pieces have a slight curve and shape to them. I could have laid them out on the mahogany and then cut them on the bandsaw and sanded them smooth. I want the two frames to match exactly, so what I did is I took the time to make a template out of 1/2 inch plywood. And the mahogany is an exact match of the template. I did take the time to sand the template nice and smooth, and now all I have to do is lay it out on my piece of mahogany. I'll make a rough cut with the bandsaw, then I'll attach this template and use my router to cut the copy. I eliminate the step of sanding by doing this. Now you'll notice that I'm cutting between a 1/16 and an 1/8 of an inch strong of my layout line. The router will take care of that. Now I can attach the template to the roughed out piece. Now this screw not only holds the template, but it also locates the center for the hole for the handle, and this one will locate the center for the axle hole. Now I'm going to put one brad right in the middle because I don't want this to flex as I run it through the router. This template just gets attached with a few brads. So now to trim off the excess material, I come to my router table. I've removed my fence and I've installed this straight cutting bit. The difference with this bit is that it has a little ball bearing right here at the top, and that's the key, because as this ball bearing rides up against the edge of the template, it makes an exact copy. The cutter will make it flush to the template. Now for what is probably the only tricky part of making this piece, cutting the half lap in this frame. Now the problem is that the piece is curved, so I don't have anything that I can set against the fence that doesn't move. Now there are several ways that I could do this. I could take a back saw, make a cut to the right depth at each layout line, and then take a router and plow out the material in between. Another alternative would be to have a sliding compound miter saw where I could set the stop on the saw to the depth of the cut and then bring it to the line. But since I have my radial, I can accomplish the same thing. What I like to do is put the piece up against the fence, and rather than move the saw, I want to move the piece. To move the piece, I use these wedges. I have several of them lying around the shop. And what I do is I bring it up against the fence, and by eye, sight down the side of my dado head cutter until it seems like it's parallel. I'll make a pass staying away from the line about 1/8 of an inch. When it's parallel, I'll slowly creep over. To make it parallel, I just adjust the wedge either in or out as the need demands. Okay, well, it took a while, but I got a nice tight joint where the two pieces come together. This is a critical joint. Now I want to drill a few holes. The first hole is going to be down at the bottom, and it's 1/8 of an inch deep, 5/8 in diameter, just to receive part of this nut on the wheel. So that takes care of the 3/8 through hole for the axle on the wheel. Now this 1 inch diameter hole, 3/4 of an inch deep, will be for the handle to push the trolley around. And now I'm ready to assemble the frames. I'm just putting a nice even coat on both sides of the joint. I'll just slip them together. Now I'll just put a spring clamp on each end. That assures me that I have a perfectly matched pair. Okay, now a clamp to squeeze the half laps together. We'll set this aside to dry and continue working on the wheel. To true up the outside of my wheel, I'm going to use the disc sander at my sanding center. I have this little centering point which I'm going to drive into the center of the hub. That's going to slide in this slot up against this stop. The distance from the point to the disc is the radius of the wheel. I'll just spin it around till it's all sanded. Okay, that takes care of chamfering the outer edge of the wheel. Now a little hand sanding will finish it off. That 1/2 inch hole, which is 1/8 of an inch deep, is to provide some clearance for the square part of this carriage bolt that I'm using for the axle. Now I have to drill a 3/8 hole all the way through. Here I'm beginning to work on the frames which hold the trolley together. The frames are made up of this 2 1/4 by 3/4 inch stock. All the corners are mitered. Now I'm going to reinforce all the miters with some biscuit slots. So a slot in the center of each end. Now the top frame goes together with the 4 mitered pieces. Then there are 3 pieces that go in the bottom, 1 at each end and 1 at the middle. These pieces will be connected to the sides with biscuits as well. Now for the assembly. A little bit of glue on the miters and some in the slots for the biscuits. And I'll actually pin the corners with some brads to hold it initially, and then I'll clamp it up. Okay, now a couple clamps to pull the joints nice and tight. And before I set it aside, I'm going to check it for square by measuring the diagonals. Just a little over 36, that's good. The lower frame will have a series of these 3/8 inch thick slats that will be slightly spaced. That'll give you a good strong storage area, and it'll allow water to go through. Those slats will sit in a groove that I'm going to make in the long pieces. To ease the edges of my slats, I'm using a radius bit like this one except it has a 3/16 inch radius. Just as before, I'm applying glue to the miter joint and installing one of the biscuits, and I'll set the pieces together and tack them in place with a couple brads. Now it's just a matter of slipping the other side on, getting all the slats in the groove, and securing it the same way. Couple clamps in each direction. Check it for squareness. Should be the same as the other one, just a little over 36. That's good. We'll set this aside to dry, and we'll easily finish this project tomorrow. Oh, good morning. Last night, all our glue-ups set up. I removed them from the clamps. And I spent a little time before you got here sanding the joints and the corners of all the trays that we made nice and smooth. The next step is to round over all these sharp edges. And to do that, I'm just using a portion of my 1/4 inch rounding over bit. To complete the round over where the router can't get into these corners, a little piece of sandpaper stuck on a block of wood does the job. Now it's time for a handle. I suppose the easiest thing to do would be to go to the home center and pick up some 1-inch dowel stock. But I think you'd find it difficult to find it in mahogany. You could use birch, you could use oak, you could even use cherry. I happen to have mahogany, I have a lathe, and I have a lathe duplicator. Now this cutter is going to do the work. I don't need a tool or a tool rest. Down here, there's a pin, a following pin, which as I move this tool closer to the straight edge, it will actually form the 1-inch dowel. The straight edge is the entire length of the dowel stock, and I just run this back and forth. It takes about 10 minutes to make a 1-inch dowel. Sanding on the lathe is the easy part. Just take a piece of sandpaper, hold it under the piece, and go back and forth until it's all smooth. Okay, and there you have it, one mahogany handle. To build this project, I took the time to lay it out on some construction board full scale. This circle represents the wheel. This little point right here is where the axle will be, and this is where the back leg will rest on the ground. With that, I was able to measure up for the frames to make sure they'll be level. This is the lower frame, this is the upper frame, and it also gives me the setback front to back. So with a line on the X frame and a pencil mark on the bottom of the tray, I just line everything up and go over to the other side and pre-drill some holes for screws. Okay, now I can set this aside and put a little glue. It doesn't hurt to glue these joints together. Now I can set the tray back in place. I'm using a combo screw that has a corrosion-resistant coating, but I'm still going to fill the hole with a plug. Okay, here's the top frame, which I'm going to attach to the X-brace. Now, before I attach the other side, let's put the handle in one side. Now I'll just dab a little glue in the hole for the handle in the opposing brace, and we'll set the whole thing in place. To install the plugs, I put a little bit of glue in the counter bore, a little bit on the plug itself, and then I try to align the grain, set it in, drive it home. And I take this little saw, just trim it somewhere near flush, and finally, the sander. Now for the wheels. I'm going to take the carriage bolt, slip on a 1/2-inch washer. That goes through the wheel, like this. And on this side, I'm going to put on a 3/8-inch washer, and then a nut. Now I'm going to bring the nut down so that it's just snug, and it still allows the wheel to spin freely, right about there. And that whole assembly goes through the leg, into that counter bore, another 3/8-inch washer, and a nut. Now all I have to do is tighten this inner nut, and because there's a nut on each side of this leg, it's not going to loosen up. And the bolt acts as the axle. Okay, let's take it out to the test track. It's great. Now we're ready to build the removable serving tray that's going to sit in this top frame. The stock that I'm going to use is more mahogany, except this time I've milled it down to a 1/2-inch thick. There's 2 long, narrow pieces for the sides and 2 wider pieces, which I'm going to have a slight shape cut in with hand holes to carry the tray around. First thing I want to do is miter the ends of all the pieces. Just as before, I'm making a 3/8-inch thick groove to pick up the slats for the bottom. Here I'm beginning to form the ends of the tray. To cut the hand hole in the end pieces, I've drilled a hole through the center of the cutout area. Now I'll just finish it off with my jigsaw. The assembly requires a little bit of glue, some biscuits, and some brads. Now in go the slats, spaced, and bradded. Okay, let's see how this fits. That's good. A little more final sanding. I'll take it into the paint shop and put on a clear protective finish, and then it'll be ready for the iced tea and the quiche. To finish our piece, I'm using an oil and alkyd-based product. It has UV inhibitors, and it makes the wood waterproof, so it should protect our piece for many years to come.